The participant owners.
What has it? It's your baby.
Millions of Americans love their pastime of pigskin football, cheering for their beloved teams all across the nation. But a growing phenomenon in America has been a game called fantasy football. It's allowed players to partake in each game during the week on Mondays, Thursdays, Sundays, on all games across the nation. Today I'll be telling you about the intricacies of fantasy football. I'll be informing you about the ins and outs of fantasy football, so the next time you overhear your friends talking about their league, you'll be able to take part in the conversation intelligently. Over the past decade, I have participated in many different types of fantasy leagues. Multiple leagues a season. Today you will learn about the history of fantasy football, 3 different types of fantasy leagues, and the scoring system used in each of those leagues. According to plaza.edu, the birth of fantasy football dates back to 1962, although the popularity of fantasy football has not grown until recent years. The founder, Bill Wilford Winkenbach, had a financial stake in the Oakland Raiders football team. The game was invented and played involving golf and baseball dating back to the 1950s. But later, in the 1960s, Winkenbach invented the game for football. He is considered the chief founder of fantasy football and passed away at the age of 81 in 1993. Fantasy football was born in a Manhattan hotel room, now known as the Milford Plaza. It was a scheme and a set of rules where fans could draft players from professional teams onto their personal teams and participate in the league. The owners were known as the people who drafted the players and controlled their teams. They would play weekly games against each other and rewarded a prize at the end of the week and at the end of the season. Today, more than ever, fantasy football has been a growing phenomenon between family members, friends, and coworkers. With the technological advances, it has grown to reach over 30 million players across the nation and world. Now that we know a little bit at the beginning of fantasy football, I will next be talking about the 3 types of leagues: a redraft league, an auction league, and a keeper league. First, we will talk about the redraft league. Each owner participates in a draft called a snake draft. So, for example, the first overall pick would not draft again until the end of the second round. This is a balancing factor, so everyone at the end of the draft has a similar talent of players. Similarly, if you have the first pick and the last pick of the second round, and if you would have the last pick of the first round, you would have then the first pick of the second round. This is a balancing factor. In all fantasy football leagues, most fantasy football leagues, there is 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a flex player that you can either plug in a running back, wide receiver, or tight end, and then a defense and a kicker. For the redraft leagues, a group often drafts numbers out of a hat to have your draft spot taken, or often a random technological factor. Second type of league that I would like to discuss are auction leagues. Instead of having a snake draft, owners start with a certain amount of fake money. At the top of the draft, owners can spend as much money as they want on a certain player, but by using this money, they need to spend intelligently so they have money to spend on players throughout the rest of the draft so they can balance their team out. This has a strategy involved that's different than a redraft league. The third and final type of fantasy league, and my personal favorite, is a keeper league. According to SBNation.com, the keeper league is similar to a redraft league, but with a little bit of a twist. Keeper means that you keep a certain amount of players from your previous season onto your next season's roster. Most often, owners keep their 2 best players from their previous season's team to be able to compete the best they can the next season. Often, different leagues have different rules about when you can keep players and how you keep them and the circumstances of keeping the players. That is most often discussed by the owners before starting their league. Now that we've talked about the 3 different types of fantasy leagues, we will discuss the scoring system involved for fantasy football. First, I would like to discuss passing, which most often involves quarterbacks. A touchdown pass for a quarterback is worth 4 points. Every 25 yards they pass for is worth 1 point, and it's minus 2 points for every interception and or fumble. Rushing or receiving. This involves tight ends, running backs, sometimes quarterbacks, and obviously wide receivers. A touchdown is worth 6 points. Every yard received or rushed for is worth 1 point. A fumble is worth negative 2 points. Defenses. Defenses are not constituted by individual players, but an entire defensive team. So when a team makes an interception or a fumble, it is worth positive 2 points. A sack is worth 1 point, and a touchdown is worth 6 points. Given your league, there are different circumstances about how points are subtracted depending on how many the yardage and points a defense gives up. Kicking. Kicking is one of the hardest parts of the game because it's the hardest to predict. 50-plus yard field goal is worth 5 points. A 40 to a 49 yard field goal is worth 4 points, and under 40 yard is worth 3 points. And that is, the field goal has to be made to achieve these point totals. An extra point is 1 point, and a missed field goal or extra point is minus 1 point from your kicker's total. The next time you hear your friends blabbling about their hobby, their crazy, crazy hobby that they take too seriously, you will understand why. Fantasy football allows each person to be their own general manager and dictate the move of their beloved fantasy football teams. Many people also love to gloat about their knowledge of sports, and fantasy football is the perfect outlet for them.